We now return to Let's Play Tomb Raider: The Prophecy, finally in Cambodia. And immediately there are Cambodian wolves, which are slightly tougher than the Swedish variety. They take one more shot. And there are a lot of them. The Cambodia levels introduce more of a, I guess, an active type of puzzle. There are platforms that you have to adjust the height of and position. And so things do get just a little bit more complicated than in the previous area. It is still pretty much the same thing, though. But these levels do have quite a bit more back and forth, and quite a few more enemies as well. These skeletons especially become really annoying really quickly. There are a few areas in this area, or in this world, that have those timers on them. And they usually end with monsters. These guys are really annoying. It's really, really obnoxious that it's just so hard to get a hit on them. The axe-throwing skeletons, which are much easier because they leave themselves open to attack when they start throwing their axes, so I much prefer them to the sword-wielding skeletons, who can just block all the time until they get right up in your face. Tricky little bit of a sprint jump right into the flames. I've got quite a few med kits now, so I don't feel too bad about using them. I'll probably end up having more than I ever plan on using. But now that we've come this way, I have to go all the way back around to continue on. Like I said, that is sort of a staple of the Cambodia puzzles. And this is a really nasty trick. You run right into 3 wolves. It's very hard to maneuver around them, too. They're in a small area. There are a couple areas throughout the game that are like that, where I'm convinced that the developers deliberately set you up so that you take damage, so that you have to use some of your medkits. Those spikes are on a very short timer. It's very easy to mistime it or miss the jump. Land right on the spikes. Have to get off almost immediately. I guess having to go back and forth kind of makes sense level design-wise, but the fact that Lara cannot run most of the time, or for very long at all, really just sort of slows down this whole section. And I'm not just talking about this level either. I mean, this is pretty prevalent throughout the 7 or 8 levels. I think there are 7 or 8. It might 6 or 7, something around that number. It's not very many, but they take quite a while just to get through because they twist and turn and go back on themselves. And there's a skeleton in pretty much every room. Got 2 this time. Thankfully, one of them is not an axe thrower. I mean, these ones are still annoying, but it's much worse to try and dodge a flying axe and stay out of the range of one of the swords. The Cambodia levels are just crawling with enemies. I'm not really sure that that adds much to the game. I mean, I suppose it prevents you from sort of just running through and solving the puzzles, but especially with the skeletons, I would prefer just the boring wolves, which are prevalent throughout the game, just constantly palette swapped, than having to fight all these friggin' skeletons and I don't move in time. Get an axe right in the stomach. Actually, you know, I would have preferred facing off against more of those axe throwers than the sword guys. Again, just because the sword guys are so hard to get without them deflecting. If there is one thing that I think this game deserves a demerit for, it's those skeletons, just because they're so obnoxious to kill. This area is a bit longer than the previous one, and right away you run into 3 wolves. If you don't know what's coming, it's very easy to just turn around the corner and be swamped by them. Fortunately, they're relatively easy to get rid of. We're very close to yet another combat section. Cambodia is just combat central, really, in comparison to the more puzzle-centric levels of the previous area. But these wolves, man, they just stick them in wherever they can. And here's another puzzle where we will be going back and forth. Go straight across the map to hit a switch to unlock a door back on the other side of the map. I suppose you couldn't really get too in-depth with a two-dimensional Game Boy game as far as puzzles are concerned. I guess there is a bit of a window once those skeletons start to rise. If you hit them just at the right time, you can get a hit in on them before they're fully risen and can defend themselves, but I really, really hate the skeletons. At this point, I'm not really sure it's worth getting everything. I am pretty much going for a 100% here, picking up all the items. But I'm not really sure it's worth going through all of those med kits. Although in that situation, I did need to go up there so I could hit the switch. I guess the design for the levels is good in that sense, that you don't really go through unnecessary detours to unlock things, aside from just the base level design here where we're going back and forth. Always be prepared for those goddamn skeletons. It's just so hard to gauge. There's just such a fine pixel-perfect line where you get too close and take damage, but you're not close enough to shoot them. It's just so obnoxious. And for some reason I just find it so difficult to actually pull it off, even though by now I've had plenty of practice with them. Now this is a nasty trick, I feel, because it puts you pretty much face to face against that skeleton. You have no maneuvering room or anything like that. I suppose, knowing that it's there, you could theoretically run back to the other side of the flames and it would try to follow you, and the flames would actually do damage if it passed through them. Probably not enough to kill it, though. And there is our first statue, which will be used later on to solve a lot of puzzles. And there we go. Finally got the timing right. And there we go, running right into an axe, and those things hurt. I sort of wish more had been done to differentiate the skeletons and their weapons, because, like I said in a previous episode, the skeletons are just really hard to pick out with their very pixely outlines and their very similar color schemes. Okay, and so this is where we pick up the first statue, actually, which is the goddess statue. And the clue is in the name. She is the goddess of the heavens. The puzzles we are going to use these statues for are basically to raise and lower platforms. Just run right into both flames. Wonderful. Here is the god of the hells. So basically, the way you use these, there will be little alcoves in the wall that you have to place the statues. And depending on which one you have, it will raise or lower certain platforms. And so obviously, by putting in the goddess of heaven, it will raise the platform, and the god of the hells will lower it. Admittedly, that is sort of a bit of a puzzle that you have to think about for just a little bit. I mean, you could do trial and error. And this is another little nasty point where you have to run right into a skeleton to get up. But here I demonstrate how you can get the skeleton damaged by running it through the flames, although I end up taking more damage than it's actually worth. But yeah, figuring out how the statues work, you could do that through trial and error. And if you think about it for a little bit, you can figure it out, but otherwise there's no indication of how it works. Here's another area where we've got more skeletons, and it's even worse this time because if I go too far to the right, I get into the flames or fall off the cliff, and if I go to the left, I'll activate the second skeleton with undodgeable axes. Just have to be better prepared. Right into another fight of 3 wolves. Absolutely ridiculous. I guess the designers felt that it was a little bit too easy in the Sweden area because you didn't have a lot of use for your guns, but I honestly think they overdid it in Cambodia. Almost right into the flames. Okay, so here's the area where we have to first learn how to use the statues. And it's important after you use them to take them with you, because you can only exit the level by having both in your inventory. And this first platform is going to take 3 times to lower it down. I could have jumped up and over top of it, but I think it's best just to go down the ledge here, not try to dodge the arrows at all. It does prevent you from having a lot of room here, though, to jump the gap. So it's got to be really quick. And here's another. Now, at this point, Lara says which statue goes in which, but I don't think there's any real visual indication of which one you need. And so in later puzzles you actually have to think about which ones go where. And she's got that little cue there where she says she needs both statues. If you don't have both of them, she will make mention of it. So it does sort of give you a hint as to whether you can leave or not. But that's another segment done. So we'll go through here, and I'll end the episode and see you next time.